May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Not one stone will be left upon another. It will all be torn down. So when I was growing up, this is from about the age of 3, kind of all the way through middle school, like the 8th grade. We lived in a 100-year-old house. This was like a Southern Victorian old house that my father was perpetually fixing up. So our house was always a construction site. It was just like, he was always, like, we'd come home, you wouldn't know, he'd be ripping out a wall or something. And so this was not the coolest place to have your friends over in the 1980s, when everyone else's house, remember, like, had shag carpet. And remember the dark wood fake paneling and little stencils of ducks everywhere. So as I was growing up, embarrassed of this place, I told myself again and again, I will never live in a 100-year-old fixer-upper. So fast forward 30 or 40 years, and I now live in a 100-year-old fixer-upper in Davidson. And the projects never end. It is, it's like I'm going to the bathroom at night and I'm stepping over power tools, right? There are, my 16-year-old son now is embarrassed to have his friends over. And we've been in this house over a dozen years now. And so, I've somehow managed to live in that house longer than I've lived in any other house in my entire life. And over these years, I've done a ton of work to the house. I've totally redone the kitchen. I've redone the bathrooms. I've torn down walls. I have tiled. I have painted. I've cut holes in walls and put doors in and doors to the outside. In the kitchen, I made cabinet doors that Ted Kratt then had to take apart and fix so they wouldn't warp. This is just kind of like never ending. It's work and more work. So at one point, this is a couple of years ago, I thought I had found my way out of this house. We found another house a little out of town. There were a few acres out there. And we were thinking, maybe we can make this work. Maybe we could sell our house in town, buy that one. And so we were talking to real estate agents and trying to get this to work. We were thinking maybe maybe we could split our lot into 2 lots. We're talking to the town. So the first time that this real estate agent came into our house and was walking around, I remember this like it was yesterday. I was showing her all of the glorious work I had done. And she turned to me, she cut me off, and she said, "So this house is a teardown." And I was like, well, wait a minute. Okay, what if somebody were to knock out this and then add on here or build up? And she's like, I am 100% sure that when you move out of this house, it will be torn down. She said the way real estate works in Davidson, she said there is nothing that anyone could do to make sense of this house here in this town. Nothing to do but tear it down. So I don't know why this came as such a shock to me. I can look around Davidson and see nicer houses being torn down and built everywhere. But that was just very hard news to stomach. I guess, I had always known there was a possibility, but I never knew it was a definite. Not one stone will be left upon another. It will all be torn down. Now I walk around my house, and that's what's going through my head. All my work, gone, in vain, right? And so don't get me wrong here. This is not a pity party. This house is the single best investment we've ever made in our life. But my pride in my work and my outlook, my calculus around like my sweat equity, that has totally changed. And then some days, I'm looking at my handiwork, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I can't believe I built that. And then my head goes to kind of, what does this say about my life and my labor existentially? As the psalmist says, it is in vain that you rise up so early and so late take rest to eat the bread of toil, for it is God that gives, even in our sleep. And on some days, when I walk around my house, there's like this inner wrestling, where this old house I'm in is reflecting back to me those parts of my life where I thought my labor was worthwhile, important, but perhaps not. Clearly, it's not my labor, but the God that put me in that house by some stroke of divine luck. And it's that God that increases the land value while I sleep. I walk around that old house, and it reflects back to me. It reflects back to me all the temples I spent countless hours building. The physical temples and castles that I've kind of made shiny. All the work of my hands. Those halls reflect back to me the interior temples I've worked so hard to erect. Those high walls, those fortresses I have built to protect myself, to shelter myself, to make myself secure and comfortable. I realize I have built like entire inner kingdoms around how I think things should be. I've built high towers and bulwarks, high ideals on how relationships in my life should be and how I think people should act and how the world in my mind should work. I've even been so bold as to build temples of theology with gleaming huge stones and ivory towers stretching to the heavens, built on who I think God is and how God acts. I have labored and constructed stone upon stone, mentally and physically, using what I think are very, very valuable materials of talent and time and treasure, only to realize in the end what Jesus and the real estate agent profess. It will all be torn down. And even as much as I trust in the resurrection, in the making new of all good things, even as much as I trust in the real estate market and profit in the end, I do not like to see how my efforts, my labors are in vain. It stings a little to see how I've missed out on my family and doing the other things that I love to do while I was busy building cabinets and tiling floors that will for certain go to the landfill. It's hard to think about all the people I have walled off by the temples I have built, all the people I have overlooked or forgotten from the height of the steeples that I have climbed. In our gospel today, the disciples come out of the temple, they gaze up, and they say to Jesus, "Look, teacher, what large stones, what large buildings." And Jesus, like the knowing real estate agent, says, "I am 100% sure this is a teardown." Jesus knows the fleeting creations and misguided aspirations. It's just our human race. It's just what we do. The late, great Jimi Hendrix said the same thing in a different way. And so castles made of sand fall to the sea eventually. The Tower of Babel always falls. Our wings of wax always melt. But this does not mean that we stop creating. It does not mean that we cease our aspirations. It just means that the only solid foundation worth building on, and the only shelter from the storms in this unsteady and confusing world, is the only shepherd worth following. Jesus shows the way. It's his way that is the way of love. His is the way of truth and what's most meaningful. His is the way of light. His is the way worth following and building on. And not one stone of any other way will be left upon another. All other ways, our old world, our old ideas, our old castles are always built on shifting sand. And so when those temporary walls that we build come tumbling down, we give thanks to God. God topples the walls so that we can see more clearly the way of the cross. It's only through the tearing down of the walls that divide and separate us as humans. It's the tearing down of the lies, of false ways, of false greatness. It's only through that dying, that tearing down, that we know true life. Death to sin, alive to new life. God tears down the walls and the temples and the towers of Babel in order to show us that God is the master builder. And that we are always completely dependent on the one true God. God is our rock. God is our temple. And we shall have no other gods, especially not the ones that we build. And so all those false gods, those idols, those dividing walls, in the eyes of our one true, loving, just, and merciful God, those are teardowns.